Welcome to Inside the Skev, and I'm your host, Aaron Maslyansky. Today we are here with Joann Kestenbaum, and she is a social worker. And, this is part of the coronavirus reaction, how people are handling things. Joann is also a client of mine, and I recently helped her sell her home. And, we'll talk a little bit about that, but we definitely want to talk to Joann about what she does and what how children and parents can help during these really strange times. So, Joann, thanks so much for joining.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it is. It's nice to see you.
Right.
And we've seen each other a little bit over the past few weeks. Having to do with real estate, and from a distance. And it was definitely. I will never forget any of these transactions I do during these times.
I bet you won't.
No, I won't. I've got two kids of my own, though, and they are off from school through who knows when. And they're 7 and 10. And I know there's people who have newborns that are, just entering this world, and you have teenagers, and you have, people, in their early 20s coming home from college. And you have people who are sometimes, far away from home if they're in college and don't want to come home to their parents. And there's a lot of different dynamics going on that changes the social fabric. What have you seen from your clients?
So what I've seen from my clients is that it has actually done two things. It has enhanced the amount of capacity and creativity on the part of clients in terms of how they're responding to their kids. The parents that I work with, which is a small amount of parents, but I work with them, I do what's called long-term treatment.
Yeah.
They have come up with some incredibly creative and empathic responses, and have decided that it's better that the kids are responding to them and enjoying the time that they have together versus fighting with them so much about schoolwork. That was a big, trying to find a balance was what some of my clients were talking about, and that they realized, you know what, it's better that we have this time together. And once they let part of that expectation of, doing so much schoolwork, they found that the kids calmed down. That was number one.
Was that a big stressor that people are dealing with? Was just like, you got to get this over with, and at the same point in time, if you're a parent, you might be working from home and try to do all that.
Exactly. And so the second thing was that the parents were able to tell me that they would balance time with exercise. And it didn't matter what kind of exercise. It could be just like taking a trip around the house, or running out in the backyard for a few minutes, or playing, with a toddler, indoor soccer with a Nerf ball, just something to break up the day. That they found that if the kids had more types of physical activity, and they could be silly ones, that the kids then were able to then sit down and maybe do half an hour's worth of work. And
Recess almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. One of my clients said that their parents, so the grandparents live far away, and they instituted writing a letter, a snail mail letter. And and it helped the kids with their fine motor skills, but it also helped the kids because the kids, an 8-year-old was saying, "Hi, Bobby, we we did this today and we took a break, and we did that today and we took a break." So the kid would sort of delineate every single aspect of the day, and then wrote very funny things like, "Your grandson," whatever. And it cracked the parents up, and then they, took a walk with masks and gloves because they had a stamp at home, and they mailed it. So the kid could see that not everything is through the computer,
Right.
So I think that what my concern for parents is is that parents being kind to themselves, and parents sort of accessing that aspect of being grateful. So I haven't had anybody who's been laid off. I'm
Wow,
somehow
you're lucky.
yeah, yeah. Somehow I've been fortunate. So I haven't had anybody who's been laid off, so that they've recognized that having a job is, a positive thing for them, because two people said that their really good friends have been laid off, and are trying to figure out what to do financially. So that's scary.
Right.
So
I know it's absolutely scary. I've talked to some different people who have been laid off and affected by family members with coronavirus, and it's like everything all at once.
yeah,
And for me in my profession, it's a
yeah,
lot about going into a house and being with people,
right, yeah,
and there's a lot of anxiety for going out and doing that. And it's like, on one hand, you have to be, I think this is probably true for many people, you have to be safe and not get sick. But on the other hand, you have to be able to provide for your family. So I'm sure that that causes a lot of stressors. I know that's something that comes up in my household,
right,
trying to find that right balance.
right.
So, I think probably the longer this goes on, unfortunately, you're probably going to be dealing with people who have, lost their jobs, and they're trying
Exactly,
to figure that out.
exactly. It's interesting because I do some collaborative work with the social workers in schools, where the kids that I see in the families that I work with.
Yeah.
And one of them has two kids, and they were talking about summer programming, and that this person is a single parent whose partner is alternately helpful and not.
Yeah.
But so that's a special case. But I was saying, go back to the social worker. I just said, because maybe something else has come across his or her desk in terms of, scholarships and funding for summer programming, because people need help. Because if people come back to work, they're going to need to put their kids in camps or childcare or something,
Right.
and to be, I'm sort of helping my clients advocate for themselves and feeling strong enough to do that, especially a single parent who's feeling like the burden of holding it all themselves.
Do you think that kids are going to have a lot of um, like PTSD from this type of situation, or do you think
Okay, so that's a really good question, and I'll tell you why. Because human beings react, and the younger you are, you react mirroring, or in a way that the people around you, who are your hopeful caregivers, are reacting.
Yeah.
So I believe in the trickle down theory of parenting. If I support parents, then the parents can be available to support their children. And so the more you're able to hold on to your own anxiety, and what I have found that people have answered me is that they talk to their peers as parents, or they talk, if they have a decent relationship with their own parents, they call them up, because getting that emotional regulation helps you to be emotionally regulated, so that when your kids start freaking out, you can say, yeah, this is a very strange time, and we're here and we love you. I mean, what children want to know is that you are the rock. You are there for them. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to fix it. You just have to be able to say, I know, I hear you're worried. And it's kind of, I liken it to that Allstate. Is it
you're in
Allstate?
good hands?
Good hands. So in other words, there was a guy a long time ago named D.W. Winnicott, and he was a analyst in England. He was also a pediatrician, and what he said was, he coined this phrase called being a good enough parent. And what a good enough parent does is just validates, yeah, I see, I think you're upset, I'm here. You don't have to make it better. You don't have to take away the anxiety. You just have to, by your saying, I'm here for you. It looks like you need a hug, or come over here, we'll read a story together. The more you can do just to validate, yeah, they are having a big feeling, or yeah, they're having a weird feeling,
Yeah.
or yeah, this is weird that people are walking around with masks on and gloves.
Right. I mean, what have some of your clients, the children, what have their reactions been to like having to wear a mask and gloves?
Well, the interesting thing is that the kids kind of, if kids are into costumes, they're okay. Seriously, I found kids who go, well, I like to dress up, so this is kind of cool. What parents have, yeah, what parents have told me though is that if they're taking a walk outside, so they're close to their kids, and the kids will see somebody across the way, and a couple of the kids have been like, "Hi," and they start to move towards, and the parents, what the good enough parents have said is, you know what, we're going to keep everybody safe, so you stay by me. They put it in a very positive light, but also pulling the kid back literally, because kids are often impulsive, and also they haven't seen people, so that they want to have a connection.
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, so you have to be positively vigilant, I say.
I think my kids are definitely picking up on the cues that I have of being careful and staying away. I don't have to
Yeah.
tell them that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The mirroring, they're like, oh, dad's standing here, I'm going to stand here.
They totally mirror me.
Yeah.
Um, but with human connection, I feel like we realize like how important it is to be physically present with other people. And a few weeks ago, I had not, I'm hurt. I mean, I'm not outside a lot, except I do go for bike rides and walks and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I was outside and I hadn't been outside for, really with interacting with anybody for a little bit, but I had to go somewhere. And I was actually at a final walkthrough and I was waiting outside the house because I didn't want to be in there with my clients. And or nor did they want me there. So so I'm standing there and this little robin bird comes up and like is standing next to me, and like I said hello to it, and I'm like, whoa, like caught myself like this.
That's great.
Yeah, but it is so built into our nature, right?
Absolutely. And I like to engage people who are helping me, whether I'm, in the CVS or in the, we've taken to calling up the CVS and saying, if I have a prescription, okay, I want to pick up the prescription. And do you also have a can opener? And can you pass it through the,
Yeah.
drive-through? And they're like, sure. Before Passover, we got a can opener, and I was looking for a peeler. They did not have a peeler, but something else. I got 2 items there, and a hand mixer. And
Yeah.
they said, oh, it's been on the shelf for a while. I go, well, I want to buy it. And they passed
Yeah.
it. So, I mean, but just to engage people, and, but I've always been like that kind of a person. And so it is kind of weird that you're not out there, talking to the people at, CVS or Walgreens or the cleaners or something like that.
Right.
So,
In regards to society, when we get back to normal, or not back to normal, but I think
right.
where they relax the stay-at-home orders, and people can't really work next to each other for a while, or have to be. Do you think it'll? Do you think there's going to be a breakdown in social fabric?
Actually, I think I'm kind of a positive person, but actually what I think is that people are going to be so grateful
Yeah.
to be with other people, that I'm thinking that because I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I think people are going to be grateful to be with other people and have that connection. So 2 years ago, a friend of mine was talking about that he was sending his first child off to college, and it was a girl, and she was communicating online with her prospective roommate, and they were talking about bedspreads and things like that to get the room set up.
Sure.
And the girl was very nervous, and the father said, do you want to know how I went to college? And she turned to him and said, okay. He said, we walked in and there were the people. And then we went over to the, the Woolworths or whatever and and picked out bedspreads together. You can have a conversation face to face. What is this? What are you so afraid of? And she said, well, what if the girl doesn't like me or doesn't like the colors that I like? And he said, so you talk about it. I mean, I'm hoping that people will feel so grateful to not be on a screen
Yeah.
that they'll be positive. But maybe I'm being a Pollyanna about this, but
I think you're right. I was reading an article this morning about how people are having fatigue from Zoom calls, like what we're doing.
right, right,
And people everyone thought that they would have nothing to do during this time, but it's there every minute there's some kind of activity or something
right,
online. And
right,
for me personally too, I've been really busy, and I've had to actually push some things off and say, you know what, I need a break, or I gotta be with my kids.
right, right,
We get them set up in the morning for their schoolwork on their computers, but there's certain things that it's like, no, you got to pay some attention to it. And then my wife is
right,
doing
exactly,
things online.
right,
She's down here in the basement for a while. So I think it is nice to have that regular human interaction. I hope we have that back soon.
yeah.
But what you do as a social worker, I mean, how long have you been doing it, and why did you get started?
Okay, so when I was in college, I went to Boston University. I'm from Boston
Okay.
originally. I went to Boston University, and my undergraduate degree is in early childhood education, which at that time meant 4-year-olds, um, and uh, and elementary ed. So your last year you have a placement, and my placement was split half 8 weeks in kindergarten and 8 weeks in sixth grade. And it was in Boston, and it was in a gentrifying, you'll appreciate this, a gentrifying area called the South End, which
Okay.
is really cool now. At that time though, it was, like there was flop houses, and then there'd be people that had taken brownstones and gutted them, so I mean it was really a very mixed neighborhood. And the parents were very interesting. I had kids in my sixth grade class. I had a kid the South End, if you look at Boston, which is small, borders on a very rough neighborhood called Roxbury. And there was a kid who lived like on the border, and he came to the school, and to make money, and I think it was also for his family, was that he got out at 6 o'clock in the morning and imagine standing in the middle of, where Irving Park, Six Corners,
Yeah.
okay, in the city. Okay, so there's all this traffic, and this kid, a sixth grade kid, and he was not tall, hawking, the Boston Globe and the Herald in the middle of that area. And I remember he'd come to school wired, and then had kid who was kept back a couple of years, and supposedly his mother was, doing various things of the night, to make money for the family. I mean, like it was crazy, these kids. So I was 21 years old. I bribed them. Oh, and the teacher that was supposed to be mentoring me,
Yeah.
he said, oh, you're here? Good. She was like 100 years old. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but she left, she walked in, introduced the kids, and for 8 weeks, I didn't see her. I did not see her.
So
It
you
would
have to
never
do
fly.
everything.
She said, here. She didn't even leave a curriculum. Like I had to like make up a curriculum. And then on Friday afternoons, I would bribe them. All week long, I'd be yelling at them. If you want to go, thank goodness we're in Boston. If you want to go and see, Paul Revere's house or this place or that place, we take the train, the T, that's what it's called in Boston. And we go various, places around the city, as like history or whatever. And, and it was a small class because there was the good sixth grade class, and there was the class that I had, which had like 11 or 12 kids, literally, and they were wild and not the brightest,
They're
human.
dealing with some things, obviously.
Absolutely. So after I did that, I thought, oh my goodness. And it was a terrible time to get a job as a teacher. It was 1973, and everywhere I went, I'd be interviewed and I'd hear the interview before me, and it would be a person who had a family to support. I'm a single girl, they, I'm sure they got the job and I didn't. So I had on a lark applied to graduate school for social work because I thought these people have way more things going on than me being a sixth grade teacher is going to help them with.
Right. You
So
gotta
I went to graduate school. I
yeah.
just did in Chicago. I left Boston.
Where'd you go in Chicago?
I went to U of C, University of Chicago. So
And have you worked, so you work in a private practice right now. Have you done
right
that
now,
for most of the time, or were you in other organizations?
no, I worked for Jewish Child and Family Services for 31 years at Virginia Frank Child Development Center.
Hmm.
So I do family counseling. I did consultation, education, and training for early childhood teachers and directors. And I did groups for parents and children. So,
What has been your most fulfilling part of that job?
um, I believe in how there's that saying, that adage, quality time versus quantity time. Well, I think that's malarkey, and because human beings need time, so sometimes you just need to be with somebody, and I believe in long-term treatment. I think that some of the families that I've seen literally needed to be reparented because they weren't parented themselves very well, so they had no capacity to parent themselves, and they realized that they were in trouble, and either that was brought to them by an early childhood teacher, or it was brought to them by themselves because they realized, I can't do this. I don't have anything to give. If
Yeah.
you haven't been given to, you can't give. It's just
One thing I want to ask you is, I've done a bunch of interviews recently for the JCC
mhm,
in regards to Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day.
right.
And, I was speaking to Eli Adler, um, who's a filmmaker, and he made a movie called Surviving Skokie. And it was about a lot about his father, Jack Adler, who was a survivor.
Mhm.
And his father didn't talk to him, didn't tell him about anything until much, much later.
Wow.
Is that something that you've dealt with within the community of people who are parents who are children of survivors, and they're, maybe just didn't have the emotional capacity to be parents themselves because they're dealing with that generational trauma?
Yes. So at Virginia Frank, we had a lot of families that were 2 and 3 generations, away from the Holocaust, but it was part of their life. And the parents who did better were because their parents told them about it. The parents who had no capacity, it was because the their own parents were unable or unwilling or both, because there's an aspect of reliving it when you start to tell it. That can be re-traumatizing, as you were asking about PTSD. So I'm very familiar with that, and it comes out in different ways in different families. It's kind of like, parents often will ask me, do I take a kid to a funeral? You know,
Hmm.
or things like that. And my thing is, yeah, because the kid needs to know what happened to this person and where did they go. So with multi-generational Holocaust, history, it's very important to figure out how to tell children, but not gory details. In other words, you say some awful things happened, and also to be able to um, own that sometimes your own reactions to things are going to be stronger or different because you had this experience. Children do better if we're honest with them about, yeah, I'm having a really big feeling here. You probably need to go to your room so that I can get myself back together. It's kind of like what I tell parents: if a baby breaks something and you have this terrible thing, like you want to start screaming at them, no, put them in the crib and walk away, and go to brush your teeth, or walk, do something to regain your control. But in terms of re-traumatizing, some people have seen and lived through horrific things. We also had, it's similar if you have clients who have been to war, like people returning from Iraq, and um, they have similar kinds of reactions and need to be able to be aware of that themselves. So I would often recommend that the parents be willing to at least open it up. So if a person who's your age, hasn't been told about it, but knows that it's in the history, to engage their own parents would do them well.
Yeah.
Because when we have secrets in families, it it says that too many subjects are verboten, and they're not. People should be able to talk about whatever's going on for them.
Right. When you do that, you kind of close off connections.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. It's like, oh, we couldn't talk about that, or oh, we couldn't talk about that, or everything's fine, or something like that. When a kid, like, um, I had a client once, and they were not Holocaust people. They weren't even Jewish, but he was charged at the age of 12 with giving his grandfather, if he was with his grandfather, he was charged with monitoring his grandfather and giving him digitalis if his grandfather started to look like he was going to have a heart attack or something. Yeah, needless to say, this is pretty traumatizing to my client, who felt like he had to fix everything, from the age of 12. So, it's what people need to realize is that children have a lot of capacity, but only that's age appropriate. So learning what's age appropriate, teaching your 7 to 10-year-old how to cook, that's age appropriate as long as you're there. Teaching them to monitor somebody's heart situation, no, that's inappropriate.
That's inappropriate. That's taking it a little too far.
Right, right, exactly.
How do
So
people know when they should come see you? Like, what is the appropriate type of situation?
so a number of things. Number one, we have people who are mandated clients, so like, I'm going to throw your kid out of school, so you better go get counseling. That's the mandated
No,
client
no.
versus the client who says, I keep yelling at my kids. I know this isn't good for them. They're looking at me with wide eyes like, what is up with you, mom or dad? So the capacity to have a little bit of self-reflection, to know that you want to parent differently, or knowing that you have very strong negative feelings towards how you were parented. So going into this in a different way um, is the time that you're going to go, I better go talk to somebody if I'm going to bring somebody else into the world.
Right. What's the difference, though? How does somebody know to go to a social worker like you versus going to a psychologist versus a psychiatrist?
The best referrals are people who get it word of mouth. It's like, I had this situation. So people generally talk to their friends and say, I had this situation. Do you know anybody? So it doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
the rate of reimbursement, because psychologists have more schooling than I do. So I get paid a little less per hour, but it's my experience. And you want to go to somebody who you're going to be able to connect with. I also tell people, whenever I give a referral, like a friend of mine will say, Joanne, I need to talk to somebody. I don't give just one person. I tend to give a few people, because you want to be able to have a person make a choice, unless, every once in a while I've felt very strongly, and I'll say, look, this is the only person who does this. You need to go to that person. Whatever personality issues you have to deal with, they know what they're doing. But most of the time I'll give people a choice, because sometimes I always say to people, you might not connect with that person. You might need somebody else,
Right.
and
Not everyone's for everyone.
right. So sometimes women who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s want to come to somebody like me if they've had a decent relationship with their parents, or if they want to work on something to have a better relationship with people who I could be their parent. And sometimes people, they don't want that at all. No, I want to go to somebody who's in the trenches the same as me. I have young women colleagues who I share office space with, who've been in the field for 10 years, and I feel comfortable sending people to them.
Yeah.
but it depends on how you're going to connect.
And your office is in Skokie, but
Right.
how are you dealing with things now that we can't really be in the same place together? Are you able to meet with people in your office, or are you doing things remote?
I'm doing things remotely. One of my colleagues, because she has kids, goes to the office, and I think she's cleaned it, and um, she just goes and does Zoom or FaceTime there.
Okay.
But I do Zoom. I do FaceTime in my house. So
Yeah. And do you find it to be effective to do it that way? Do you lose anything by doing it with FaceTime? Because I know, like, talking to people over the years before, they didn't want to do anything remote, but now it's a necessity.
right. So I find it to be, and I took a little survey with my colleagues and friends. It's exhausting. I like it because I have connections, and I have most of my clients are long term. I only have one about whom I'm very worried, but I'll tell you about that. But so I find it exhausting because you really have to scan the room, and you have to be aware of what's going on in the background and things like that. Whereas if you're in your office, everybody gets into a routine. Also, there are some kids and families that don't want to be on FaceTime, so I just hear them.
Yeah.
I had one kid who basically would draw with me, so that's a little challenging. So um, uh, he only wanted to hear my voice. Finally, I mean, at first he was like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't like that." But some families, hooked me up because they're very computer savvy, and I'm on their big screen TV. I do not want to know what that looks like. But they sit there and they have a nice, great room, and so they sit there and they fool around and they jump over the couch and things like that. I find that I used to do 4 or 5 sessions in a row. Now I do two, and I come out and I say hi to Manny. I go, oh my gosh, like I need to refuel myself because it's more intense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my wife says too. She's a reading specialist, so she
Right.
helps a lot of people who have dyslexia.
Right.
She'll be down there, and it's session after session after session. Nobody cancels because you don't have to get there.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
and and you're sitting there, you're looking at the screen, and it's sometimes hard to get some of her clients, their kids, to pay attention and get to it, because they're not right there in front of you. But it is what it is. What you said, you're very concerned about one of your clients. What's
Yeah.
going on?
So they consulted they consulted me through a friend of mine, actually somebody I mentored a couple of years ago, and she called me up and she was crying and she said, a friend of mine told me about a young woman who just died, who the father has 2 little kids, and needs to talk. And I said, okay. So like within an hour, the gentleman called me and we made a nice connection, and I saw them a number of times. But the first connection was, should I bring the kids to the funeral? And I said, yes. And he said, I wasn't going to. And I said, well, you called me, so you must have had some ambivalence. And he said, mean I'm going to have to talk about this. I said, oh yeah. And then, no, he was partially like joking, but then, and then they started to come in. But because he's a single parent, and he does have the help of some older generation that's helping him, but he's also now working at home, and he can't seem to figure out a way to do. And he's computer savvy because that's what he does. He's a
Yeah.
computer guy. He can't seem to figure out a way to sit with the kids and you know be on FaceTime with me. So I send him texts, go, hi, how you doing? But they were fairly new clients, and they've had a real trauma. you know the last conversation was that the 2.5-year-old said, okay, when's she coming back? you
Oh,
know yeah. So that's who I'm worried about, but I also only know them a few months, so
right.
it's
That is quite a wallop of horrible things to deal with all at once.
exactly.
And even, a lot of families, like my own. My
Yeah,
parents would watch my kids a couple nights a week after school,
yeah,
and it would allow us to be able to do what we need to do, and then I pick them up, and it was nice to be able to go and visit with them for a little while, and now we're not
right,
going into their house.
right.
um, and that's just it. There's a lot of dynamics of things that are going on. I think people in your industry are going to be busy. Or,
Oh yeah. It was funny because the one I was telling you about, the child who said, no, 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 I don't want to be on FaceTime and everything. So
yeah.
the mother sent me this beautiful text, which was very informative of how I work. Sometimes I like read a text and go, oh, okay. And then I called her up and I said, so you want to end? And I said, we need to have a formal ending. And she said, no, 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 I don't want to end. I just want to take a break because he's not in school, so his level of anxiety has really dropped. But she said, are you kidding? I need to be able to talk to you. She said, no, 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 no. She was like, I said, oh, well, this teaches me to read the text more than
Yes, I think we've all been guilty of stuff like that.
really. It's like, oh, they want to end. Because I was like, well, we have a planful ending and everything. She goes, end? I never said end. Like, and she, unfortunately, last year, she's fine now, but went through a traumatic physical thing. So I think that her kids, and she has a number of them, are responding to, oh, it's great, mom is here and she's okay and blah, blah, blah. But they still have this niggling thought of, she wasn't okay last year. She was in the hospital, and this particular kid, the one who I was seeing, was like, really, he somehow carried it for everybody. So
It's hard.
yeah,
It's hard. I mean, I'm grateful for what you do and for people in your industry, and all the mental health professionals out
right,
there right now. And in addition to all the people working in the hospitals, trying to help all these people with COVID and whatever else comes up, and taking that type of risk. But I think that the mental health issue is so important,
yeah.
to be able to get through it. Where can people reach out to you if they want to talk to you?
So they can call me, and my number is 847-899-2911. So,
Okay.
you know,
Well,
and
that's
if they want to email, you can do J Kestnbaum, and you know how to spell my name, Aaron.
yes, I do.
51 at gmail.com.
Okay. Um, I will put that in the description for in the notes here on YouTube.
Right.
But I please, if anyone needs the help, please reach out. But Joanne, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us today, taking the time, and I hope this helps somebody here in the audience. And thank you so much for watching.
Thank you for asking me.
You're welcome.